Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you today to work with you on a problem that will help you with AMI day number 24. Um, let's read this problem together. It says to make a quilt, a quilter is buying fabric in two colors, light and dark. He needs at least 9.5 total yards of fabric. So let's take a look at our graph that we're given. It's titled Amount of Fabric. And let's look at some key pieces here. First of all, we have our x-axis running along here, running horizontally. And our x-axis is labeled as the amount of light fabric in yards. Light fabric in yards. And our y-axis running vertically over here is labeled as dark fabric in yards. So this is the amount of light fabric in yards and the amount of dark fabric in yards. And notice that our scale for both the x-axis and the y-axis is that we're counting by ones. We're going from 0 to, here's 11, so that would have to be 12, and here's 11, so that top piece would also be 12. So we go from basically 0 to 12 yards of fabric for the light and also for the dark. Notice that we have this gorgeous little green piece here. We have a white piece and we have a green piece. So let's think about for just a minute. This will help us. Let's look at number one, and then we'll talk about this graph a little bit more because they go together here. Number one asks us to write an inequality. Inequality. That means it's going to have a less than or a greater than, or it might have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to in it. An inequality. To represent the amount constraint. Holy cow, what does that mean? Well, amount is what our graph is telling us. The amount is how much. So the amount of fabric. The word constraint, now there's a word that we don't hear a lot. The word constraint is just another word for a restriction or a limitation. So if we go back to the problem, we learn about this restriction. It says that this quilt maker needs at least 9.5 total yards. I'm going to highlight that for us. At least 9.5 total yards of fabric. So that's going to help us out when we are writing this inequality. They tell us that we're going to let X represent the yards of light fabric. Well, that's exactly what we saw right down here. And that Y will represent the yards of dark fabric, which is exactly what we saw up here. So let's think about this. He's going to buy some light fabric. He's going to buy some dark fabric. And he needs at least 9.5 total yards. So that means if we take the light fabric that he buys, however many yards of that he buys, and we take the yards of dark fabric that he buys, and we add those together. So he has so much light, so much dark. When we add those together, the total needs to be at least 9.5. So we're going to have 9.5 over here. At least. Well, that means he could get exactly 9.5. Or if he needs at least, then that means he means he needs that much or more. So we're going to use a greater than sign. So remember, the inequality points to the smaller piece. So when we add these together, we need to be equal to, or we need to be more than the 9.5. It opens to the bigger side. So this side would be bigger than 9.5. So when we come over here and we look at our graph, let's see where that comes from. Well, we know that if we come over here and we say he didn't buy any light fabric, we're going to take this completely out. No light fabric. Then how much dark fabric could he get? Well, he could get, here's dark fabric, he could get 9.5 yards, or he could get more. So there's our point at 9.5. If he didn't get any dark fabric, how much light fabric could he get? Well, he would have to get greater than or equal to 9.5 yards. So here's the exactly 9.5, and then it goes on to the right of that is more than 9.5. So if we connect these two dots that I just made on my two 9.5s, that would be exactly 9.5 yards of fabric. Every point there is exactly 9.5 yards. So what does the green portion represent then? Well, that's going to represent more than 9.5 yards. So anything under here is going to be less than 9.5. So we need to be over here. So sure enough, there's our inequality. Let's look at question number 2. It says select all the pairs that satisfy the amount, that's how much he's going to get, constraint, that restriction. In other words, it fits in this, it makes this equation true, or excuse me, inequality true, or it also would make, it would fit on the graph. So let's start with this point 5, 5. This means our X is 5, our Y is 5. In other words, if the quilter buys 5 yards of light fabric and 5 yards of dark fabric, is it going to work? Well, we can go to the graph and we can look at the graph. Here's 5 yards of light fabric. Here's 5 yards of dark fabric. And if we come to where they meet, it ends up meeting up here somewhere. And that is in the green portion. The 0.55 is in the green portion. That's one way to look at it. The other way is we can say, well, wait a minute. If we add our X and our Y together, if we add our 5 and our 5 together, we get 10. Is 10 is bigger than 9.5 or equal to? Yes, it's bigger than 9.5. So that means that he can buy 5 of each and have enough fabric. Let's take a look at 2.5, 4.5. 2.5 yards of light, 4.5 yards of dark. Well, here's 2.5 right there. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Is that going to be enough? Doesn't look like it. It's not on our line and it's not in our green portion. So let's double check. If we were to add those together, 2.5 and 4.5, that gives us 2.5 plus 4.5 is 7. That's not 9.5 or bigger than 9.5. 7 is not bigger than 9.5, so that one doesn't work. What if we get 7.5 yards of light fabric and 3.5 yards of dark fabric? Here's our 7.5 of light. 1, 2, 3.5. We're well into the green portion. Looks like it's going to work. Let's check by addition. 7.5 plus 3.5 is 11. Is 11 going to be greater than or equal to 9.5? Sure, 11 is bigger than 9.5. So we're going to highlight that choice. One more to check. 12 yards of light, 10 yards of dark. Well, here's the 12, and 10 is way up here. Yeah, that's in our green portion. Remember, this green portion is going to keep going forever and ever and ever, right? I mean, you could keep getting more and more fabric. I don't know who would want to, but more and more and more fabric. So looks like that's going to work. Let's check by addition. Is 12 plus 10 going to be bigger than 9.5? Well, yeah, it's 22. That's a lot bigger than 9.5. So we're going to highlight that one as well. Good job. All right, let's take a look at question 3 and question 4. They go together. Question 3 says, find at least one pair of numbers, that would be an ordered pair like we were looking at up here, that satisfies the constraint. In other words, that makes it true. Remember, our constraint was X plus y has to be greater than or equal to 9.5. So we need to find a point on our graph that makes this true. That would be enough fabric. And we have to be able to explain how we know. So let's go to our graph. That means we're looking for something. Where is it, the white portion or the green portion? We want it to be true. We want it to satisfy it. So it's got to be up here in the green portion. So let's just pick any random point up here. So let's look. Here's a point right here. That looks like it's 6, 10. So the point 6, 10. Now, what can we say? It says it satisfies it because why? Well, we could say because it's in the green portion, because it's in the shaded portion. That's one reason, because our graph tells us that if it's in the shaded portion, it works. But can we prove it mathematically? Well, let's go back to this idea of if we add them together, it has to be greater than or equal to 9.5. So we can say it satisfies the amount constraint or restriction because 6 plus 10 equals 16, and 16 is greater than or equal to 9.5. So we can say because 16 yards is more than 9.5 yards of fabric. So we've got a couple of options here. We can show that when we add them together, we do get more than 9.5 yards of fabric. That's a great way to explain this in the context of the problem, because we're talking about the quilt maker and the amount of fabric. To just say because it's in the green portion doesn't really give us a reason that is completely mathematical, nor does it tell us what it is in context of the problem. It's better than nothing, though. I would much rather you say it's in the green portion than to leave it blank. But I would really love it even more if you could give me a mathematical reason why. Problem number 4 says find at least one pair of numbers that does not satisfy the constraint. In other words, if we were to substitute in our x plus our y, looking for it to be greater than 9.5, we would find that it is false instead of true. Does not satisfy means that it is false. It doesn't fit our restriction. So on the graph, where's it going to fall? If you said in the white portion and the unshaded portion, you are correct. We need some point in here that in the white section, because it's not going to satisfy. So let's pick a point. We can pick a point like maybe 1, 4. That'll work, I think. Let's see. Again, you could say because it's not in the shaded portion or it's not on the line. We could do that. It's not completely wrong, but I would prefer it if we had some sort of a mathematical reason why. So let's think about, we're using x plus y has to be greater than or equal to 9.5. 1 plus 4 equals 5, and 5 is not greater than or equal to 9.5. It isn't enough fabric. That's a great mathematical reason why. That's a great reasoning, a great statement. So this should help you get set up. The one that you're working on is not exactly like this one, but it's a little bit more about the quilter. So Pay attention to what we did here. Come back and listen some more if you need to. You can always go back and listen, come back and listen to it multiple times to help you out with the one that you're going to work on. And good luck to you.